Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel, and this is my first video in JavaScript Simplified video series. Today we'll talk about prototypes. What are prototypes in JavaScript? What is proto keyword and its alternatives? What is prototype chaining and inheritance, and how to extend a prototype. So let's get started. Since we all know everything in JavaScript is an object and prototypes are object also, but every object in JavaScript inherit their features from their prototypes. Even prototype inherit their feature from their prototypes. And the good part is we can even create our own prototypes. Let's understand prototypes with some code. I am creating an array here with some random values. Let's say b, a, y, s. So I have created an array. Now let's try to sort this array. We all know we can do this with the inbuilt sort function that we have in JavaScript, and the array is sorted. So have you ever wondered where this sort function comes from? The answer is from its prototype. Let's try to get the prototype of this array. We can get prototype of any object in JavaScript with this object.getPrototype function. When you press enter, we see that this is a prototype which has all the features that we normally use with arrays, like concat, entries, every fill, find, flat, join, index of. We'll find everything here. And this simply is prototype, and this is where everything in JavaScript inherit their features from. Now if you create a string, let's create a simple string. Even this string will have a prototype of its own, where let's try to get get its prototype. We'll use the same function get prototype of. Now here's the prototype which has all the features that we normally use with string. So now we know what are prototypes. Let's understand what is proto keyword, and since proto keyword has been deprecated, what are its alternatives that we can use in our daily code. Let's understand proto keyword with some code. So we already have an array. Let's try to get the prototype of this array with proto keyword. So here it gives us the prototype of array instance that we just created. Now uh, what does this mean? It means that proto keyword is simply a pointer towards a prototype of any object that we have. So we also created a string. Let's try to get the prototype of the string. So here again it is giving us the prototype of that string. Now there is one more thing that we can do with proto keyword. We can create our own prototypes and add it to any object. Let's create a new prototype and add it to this array that we just created. So we can simply do this by assigning a value to it, and as a prototype I would like to create a simple empty function. That's it. So we have created a new prototype which is an empty function, and we have attached to this array instance, and let's see if that works. If we try to get object.getPrototype of, if you try to get prototype of this array, you are getting an empty function. Simple as that. Let's try this with proto keyword as well. It will return empty function, exactly the same result. So now we have the proto keyword has been deprecated, and we won't be using it for long. So what are its alternative? The one function that we already discussed in this video, that object.get prototype of, and another one is object.set prototype of. So with the help of this function, we can replace this functionality. Let's try to set a new function as a prototype of array instance that we created. We can use the same syntax, and that's it. So proto keyword is just an pointer which points toward the prototype of any object, and it has been deprecated, so we can use these two functions, object.set prototype of and object.get prototype of, to replace it completely in our code. Now we know what are prototypes in JavaScript and how to access and set a prototype. Now it's time we learn about prototype chaining and prototypal inheritance. Let's get started. As we discussed, everything in JavaScript is an object, and every object has a prototype from which it inherits its properties. So prototype is an object itself, so it has its own prototype, and so on. So the chain continues until a null value has been received as a prototype. Let's see this with some code. So we have this array variable array. Let's try to access its prototype. Let's create a shorthand for this, for object.getPrototype function. Get prototype gp object.getPrototype of. This will do. Now we won't have to type this whole syntax again. gp, now we'll get the prototype of array. This is function, this is the prototype that we created. Now let's try to get the prototype of this prototype. It's again a function. Now let's do this again, the object, and let's do this again one more time, null. So we can see we have started with this array, then we found that it has a prototype, and that prototype also has a prototype, and that prototype also has a prototype of its own, until a null value has been received as a prototype. So this is called prototype chaining. Now let's understand what is prototypal inheritance. Let's clear the screen. For this, let's create two objects, obj1. Let's give it some properties. Let's say name. Let's create another object, obj2. Let's give it some other property, last name. So there are two objects, they do have different properties. What if you want to get this property of object2 inside object1? Can we do that? No, this is not possible by default, but we can use prototypal inheritance, and we'll be able to access this last name with this object inside this object1. So how do we do that? We can do it by simply using the set prototype of function. What we'll do, we'll set object2 as prototype of object1, and it's done. Now if we try to access the property of object2 inside object1, we'll be able to do that. So how is this happening? So how this is happening? We have assigned object2 as prototype of object1. Now how JavaScript works, if you try to access the property of any object, it will look for that property inside that object. If it doesn't find that, it will look for that property inside the prototype of that object, and so on until that null value has been received. Now we know what are prototypes in JavaScript, what is proto keyword and its alternatives, what is prototype chaining, and what is prototypal inheritance. It's time we understand So JavaScript provides us with many features with the help of prototypes by default, like array sort, get index of, etc. But what if you want to create our own features, like if you want to create a function inside prototype to get sum of array? How do we do that? Let's try to do that. Let's create a simple array with some random numbers. Now let's try to add a new feature. Prototype dot sum. So inside that array prototype, we are adding a new feature called sum, and inside this function, with the help of this keyword, we'll be able to get all the values inside any array which will be using this sum function. Now we'll use return here, and with this we'll use reduce, and the arrow function. We usually do two arguments here, and we'll simply return the sum. So as simple as that, we have created a sum function. So the good part is we'll be able to use the sum function with all the arrays which has already been created or which will be creating in future. Let's try to use it with ARR. So we'll get the sum of all the elements that are there in ARR. Let's try to create a new array, ARR1, with some random values, 101, 2, 3. Let's try to get sum of this array. So that's how simple it is to extend a prototype, and that's how powerful it is. So I hope this will be really useful for you guys to learn this. In this video, we have covered everything about prototypes. What are prototypes in JavaScript? What is proto keyword and its alternatives? What is prototype chaining? What is prototypal inheritance? And how to extend a prototype. Hope you guys liked this video. Please consider subscribing if you do. And please like and share this video as well. Thank you.